one of the things that we share in common with Muslims is that they actually use a lunar calendar. One of the effects of this is that their most famous holiday, Ramadan, which this year happens to take place in March and April, in 10 years actually takes place in December and January, moving from springtime to winter. The reason this happens, of course, is because a solar month takes about 30 or 31 days, and a lunar month takes 29 to 30. In a regular year, there's not much of a difference, but over time, it makes a big difference. We, in our calendar, we avoid this problem with something called Ibur Hashanah. Every few years, we have two Adars. We double up in the Adar, Adar Aleph and Adar Bet. Why do we do this? So the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah actually tells us that the reason is a pasuk in this week's parasha. Torah says, Hayom atem yotzim b'chodesh ha'aviv. We're leaving in the month of springtime, which of course refers to Nisan, which is the beginning of the Tekufah of springtime. This pasuk refers to the fact, according to the Gemara, that Pesach must always fall out in the springtime. Because Pesach has to always fall out in the springtime, we have to make sure that it doesn't move along the calendar. It always has to fall out in that Tekufah. Question is why? Why is it so important that Pesach should fall out in the springtime? The Lubavitch Rebbe Zatzal actually turned his attention to this question and gave a fascinating answer. He explained that we naturally tend to think that growth comes as a result of experiences that feel productive, pleasant, and positive. That's how we expect things to work. But winter actually puts the lie to that. You look outside during winter, and what do you see? Barren trees. You feel bitter cold, and you experience early darkness. And it looks like, frankly, the world is essentially dead. Nothing's going on. We're just hibernating, waiting to be vibrant again when the spring comes. But then spring arrives, and it arrives quickly. The flowers bloom, the trees are filled with leaves and fruit, and the ground becomes covered with life. And it turns out, of course, that when everything looked blank and dead and dormant, something was actually growing underneath the surface during all of that winter. So too, Lubavitch Rebbe explains, in Egypt, it felt like Bnei Israel themselves were dead and dormant, a stillborn nation that had no life to it. But from the moment of Geulah, things started to pick up quickly. And it became clear that the experience that they had in Galut was actually what prepared them for their future as God's nation. That's why it's so important to keep Pesach in springtime, to show that the long, dark nights of winter are what lead to the verdant, green flourishing of spring. I'm actually sure that many of us feel that 2020 is kind of a throwaway year. In general, the last several months have been just dead time. I don't know what the future holds. But I personally prefer the hope that we may yet each find out that this period in our lives will actually lead to lush, rich fruit in the months and years to come.